The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, this is Ashley Gatewood at CFRE. Thanks for joining us today for our first ever presentation of the How to Become a CFRE presentation for consultants. If you've ever been on one of our How to Become a CFRE webinars before, this will look pretty similar, but there are a few nuances for consultants. So we will run through those. And I am joined today by my colleagues, Paul and Christine, and they are on the back end. They will be answering your questions. So feel free to type your questions in the question pane. We will treat them all as anonymous. And we will also stop a couple times during the presentation and we will discuss your questions live. So don't be shy, feel free to put your questions in there. And today's webinar is being recorded. We will email you the link within 24 hours. All right, so with that, I'm going to begin with a couple FAQs. The application cost is $875 US at the regular rate and $700 if you are a member of a participating organization. So that would be like an AFP, AHP, Canadian Association of Gift Planners. We have 29 on our website that are listed. So if you are a member of one of those, you will get that special discounted rate. We also are going to reference today the candidate handbook, the test content outline, and the glossary. And those are all available on our website. And I'll also include links to those in our follow-up email today. And today's presentation counts for 1 point in the fundraising education section of your CFRE application. So if you have a CFRE application, that is where it will go. So make sure that you log that because you do not want to miss out on your points. So we're going to talk for a consultant, why would you want to become a CFRE? And obviously, you want to prove your fundraising savvy to all of the people that you're coming into contact with, right? So whether that is your clients, your grant makers, you might be meeting with community leaders, major donors that you want to shore support up with, you absolutely want to be sure that you are able to demonstrate your fundraising savvy to those folks. Now, get this to go here. Now, you also want to have the strongest body of fundraising knowledge possible. And back when I could go to conferences and exhibit for us, I would meet CFREs all the time. And they would often tell me that they were surprised by how much they learned going through the CFRE process about fundraising. Even people who think they really know it all, there's always something more to learn. The stronger your fundraising body of knowledge is, then the better you are going to be situated to serve your clients and causes, right? Because you ultimately want repeat business. You also want to be able to compete. If somebody is going to have three consultants come in and pitch to them for business, you may be up against other consultants who are CFREs, right? So you want to be sure that you have this certification so that you can have that level of knowledge and compete properly. And also to instill confidence. We hear this all the time. We've done multiple surveys on this, and time again, CFREs tell us that going through this process has elevated their confidence for fundraising. There are many benefits to being a CFRE. The first is that we are the only globally recognized and accredited certification for fundraising. So if you are based, let's say, in Buffalo, and you're working for a client in Buffalo, New York, but they have an office in Toronto and they want them to join a call, that you're having a strategy call, something like that, your CFRE means as much to the Canadian folks as it does to the US folks. And that applies for any country, right? Because we are the only certification for fundraisers in the world that is accredited. And again, you may find yourself with clients from another country or clients that are very international, right? That have branches all over the place. So that just instills more confidence with them for working with you. It's also a way to prove your competence of best practice fundraising. And I always say, everybody says, oh, I'm amazing at fundraising. I'm really great. Here's XYZ reason why, but having a third party validate that is really priceless, because that's not just you saying that, that is us vouching for that. So there's absolutely no downside for you to have the CFRE. And we don't ever like to think about accountability and ethics issues. I personally, about 14 years ago, worked for a nonprofit where my coworker stole $1.5 to $4 million. We still don't know. But at any rate, if you've ever been in a situation like that, worked for an organization that's had a situation like that, you have accountability and ethics top of mind constantly. People want full faith in your ability to fundraise ethically, because no organization wants to see their names in the headlines for the wrong reasons. And as a consultant, you're being hired to be the smartest person in the room. So you need to have the ability to give your clients every assurance that you are, in fact, that smartest person in the room. But I've heard people say to me before, okay, well, if I meet with a major donor, I don't think they know what CFRE is. And that could be very true, right? They might not know. But a woman that I met at a conference told me this story that she met with a major donor. She handed that person her business card, and it had CFRE after her name. And that person said, "What's CFRE mean?" And she told them about the standards, how she had had her knowledge tested with a 200-question exam. She had to prove, all of these different things. And the person said, well, that's exactly the kind of person I want to work with, and I feel really good about this. So even if you might be talking to community leaders or people like that that aren't familiar with CFRE, it really is a way for you to start the conversation when you have it on your business card, your email signature, your website, your blog, all those places. Some areas of fundraising are more heavily credentialed than others. And what I mean by that is, if you work for a hospital or a health foundation, cancer center, right, something like that, those are environments that are really heavily credentialed. Doctors, nurses, other people, right, accountants, they need to have their own certification. So they're looking for other people that they work with to be certified in their area of expertise as well. And the same goes for higher education, because clearly those folks have a very vested interest in believing in lifelong learning, and they want to see that people are keeping up with continuing education. And having the CFRE demonstrates exactly that, right? So especially if you are looking to work with healthcare or higher ed clients, there's totally a great kind of brand shine from that. But it's also a benefit even if you're not working in those two arenas, because people always want to have full assurance that you know what you're doing. If you haven't yet started your application, you can get started on our website. It's completely free to begin your application. So if you're on the fence, you're not too sure if you even want to become a CFRE, go ahead and start it. There's no downside to it, because that way you can log all of your information in there. And you'll see on the screen here, there's these two arrows that have come up. On our website, if you click either of those spots, you will be able to begin your application. You only pay when you're ready to submit it. And if it takes you 2 years to fill it out, that's totally fine. There's not a hard and fast deadline for when you need to have it filled out. So if you are heavily working towards earning the requirements that you need to become a CFRE, that's totally fine. Go ahead and get that application started. So now I'm going to start with the education section of the application. And this is the area that usually takes people the longest amount of time to work on. You need 80 points, and they need to have been earned within the last 5 years. And people often think, okay, great, thanks, Ashley, but what is the point? So the way it works is you are awarded 1 point for every hour that you're in a fundraising session. So if you attend a 1 hour webinar on corporate sponsorships, that's 1 point. If you attend a 3.5 hour masterclass session on developing relationships with grant makers, that's going to be 3.5 points, right? So super straightforward. 1 point equals 1 hour that you are attending a session. If you ever present, you can earn points faster, and you will earn 2 points per hour that you're presenting. However, if you present new material for the first time, we will give you 3 points for that. So if you intend to deliver a bunch of new content, that's even all the better for earning your points. We do have a 36-point ceiling on presenting, and we can take up to 10 points max for attending non-fundraising education, but it must be relevant. And we've seen all kinds of things that people try to squeak in. We've had people try to get points for chocolate making classes, yoga for fundraisers, but we really need to see something more along the lines of a leadership course, a management course. If you go on a technology course like Razor's Edge is fundraising related, but that counts. If you go on a technology course like Excel, all of that is going to count because that's easy for us to draw a line between your participation in that and your work as a fundraising professional. In order for that education to count, it needs to be at least 45 minutes. And that's important to keep in mind because now you'll see at conferences there are a lot of these little 15-minute quick sessions or 25-minute talks, and those will not count because they do need to be at least 45 minutes. So just take that into account. Another way that people can earn points is through what we call service learning, but that is our term for volunteering. And you can earn up to 10 points for your volunteer activities, which is very nice. We will award you 1 point per year per organization that you're a volunteer. So for instance, let's say you served as a volunteer in an after-school program from September of 2019 until February of 2020, right? That's 5 months, but it's across 2 years. So you're going to get 1 point for your 2019 service, and you're going to get 1 point for your 2020 service. And if you're on a committee or a board, you will get 2 points per year per org. And if you volunteer with your church, temple, mosque, your faith-based activities, you can absolutely earn points that way. The same thing if you are volunteering for your child's school, you can absolutely earn points for that. Now, as a consultant, you are probably more likely to author than people who are not consultants. And we can also award you 5 points per published article, but they need to be 500 words or more, and they cannot be self-published. So if you're a consultant and you have your own blog, and let's say you publish a 600-word post every Monday, that's not going to count. You need to have it published by a third party for it to count. We can also award 15 points per book chapter that you write, and if you write a book, you can earn 30 points for education. Now, the next section that we'll talk about is academic degrees. If you have an academic degree, that's great. If you don't have an academic degree, that's no problem either. It's not a prerequisite at all to become a CFRE. We award 10 points per bachelor's, master's, JD, or PhD, and it can be any year, any major. So if you have a bachelor's in French from 1999, 10 points. If you have a master's in computer science from 1987, 10 points, right? Any year, any major. If you have an associate's degree, again, that's any year, any major, and we can offer you 5 points for each of those. We can also combine your degrees. So if you have a double major, that's totally fine. We will make sure that you get the correct number of points for each of those, right? And we can take up to 40 points as a maximum from your degrees. So if you have 9 PhDs, tip of the hat to you. That's very impressive. However, we are going to max that out at 40 points from degrees. And as I said, if you don't have a degree, that's totally fine too. But a lot of people, if you have a degree, they find that they are not starting from a place of 0 on their application. So at this point, people often think, okay, well, that's great, but I have kind of wondering what are some things that count all up. So those fundraising webinars, and I really can't stress this enough. We've had a lot of people that have come to us this year, especially, that have said, I can't afford to go to conferences online. My workplace is not going to pay for any professional development. And we completely understand. There is so much free education right now via webinars through a lot of our participating organizations, different foundation councils, different state nonprofit organizations. If it's on fundraising, it's going to count. So if you attend 20 free 1-hour webinars, that would be 20 points and you wouldn't have had to pay anything for that, right? We have had a number of people tell us that they try once a week to watch a webinar for at least an hour, right? So that can be a really great way that at no cost to you, you can start earning those points. If you attend lunch and learns, conferences, and then we can also award points if you listen or watch the recordings of conferences. So for instance, I know AFP Icon, when you register, you get access to recordings of all the sessions. So there might be what you attended live during the broadcast, and then 2 weeks later, over the course of another month, you went and you listened to all the other sessions. You're going to get points for that. So that can be also a really great way off of registration for one conference to bank up a lot of points. Workshops, master classes, we can accept panel discussions, roundtables, academic courses, certificates. If you have a certificate of nonprofit management, something like that, we can award points. And like I said before, authoring. So these are all the areas that are going to count. Now, what doesn't count? Any presentation that you make for work. So this is super important for you because if you're making a pitch to a client or you're training their board on how to make thank you calls, that is not a presentation that's going to count, right? That is you doing your job, the job that you have been hired to do. So we cannot award you points for that. But if you present at a conference, at your local AHP chapter, Aldi, all of those great things, then that's how you would get those points. Or if you're a consultant and you're running your own webinar series, right? Then that would be pretty good too. Now, we're going to talk here about presenting non-fundraising material. Somebody asked me one time, could they get points for being a swim coach? Unfortunately, no. So we cannot accept any points for you presenting non-fundraising material. So if you present on how to use Excel, then we're not going to be able to award you points. So we can give you points for attending an Excel class, but not for presenting that. Anything that happened more than 5 years ago, with the exception of academic degrees, we also cannot accept. That's super important right now because we're coming up on the end of the year. If you have any education from 2015, it is going to expire on January 1st of 2021. If in 2015 you went to 3 conferences and you banked up a whole heap of education points, if you want them to count, you are going to have to get that application submitted before the end of the year, because otherwise they are going to expire and you unfortunately will not be able to get credit for them. We also cannot accept networking events or awards events. So if you go to a National Philanthropy Day and it's people in your community receiving awards, that's not going to count because there's not any fundraising instruction. Mentoring sessions don't count. And if you're listening to podcasts on fundraising, that's also not going to count. One of the biggest areas where we see people make mistakes in their application is how long they've been attending a conference. So a lot of people think, okay, this conference goes from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's 7 hours. I'm going to get 7 points. But no conference has you in instruction for 7 hours without a break. So what you need to do is subtract out all of those breaks. So we recommend that you keep a copy of the agenda so that you can refer to that you're going to have to subtract out any networking time, receptions, lunch, morning coffee, anything like that, because it's not fundraising instruction, it's not going to count. So what we really tend to see with a conference, that per day, it's more likely you're going to get 4.5 to 5.5 points per day. If you send us something and you say that you got 8 points in a day, we will send your application back to you and request a copy of the agenda. You also need to subtract out any session you missed. So if you had to take a phone call, you had to, go sit in your car and do some work, whatever, that's also going to need to be subtracted out. All right, so that concludes the top 3 main areas of the application, and we will get into the other areas of the application and the exam further down the line. But are there any questions, Paul, that we've had come in about the education section of the application? Oh, hey, Paul, I think you might be on mute. Are you there?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ashley. We have one question come in that I think is that several people have asked a variation of the same question, and that is, what sort of qualifies as eligible presentations? Who can they present to, and what is not eligible? So maybe just a refresh on that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah, so if you're presenting to a client, if you're training a client, if you're pitching to a client, that's not going to count. But if you're presenting for a webinar, a conference, a master class, something like that, then that is going to count. Is there anything else you might like to add, Paul? You're a guru on this thing.
Yeah, that's pretty much accurate. Any presentations that are made as part to clients or as part of your employment responsibilities are not eligible for education credit, but you can definitely list those as part of your professional performance projects. So keep that in mind. It's not that we don't value those types of presentations, but we don't consider that eligible for continuing ed because it is part of your employment responsibilities. So anytime you present, whether as a volunteer, even if you get a small stipend for your presentation, as long as you're presenting a fundraising topic that is not related in any capacity to your job responsibilities or as part of your contractual responsibilities to your clients, then that would be eligible as education credit for that presentation.
Excellent. Any other questions that might have come in the last minute or so?
Can you repeat the point values for academic degrees?
Sure. So it's 10 points per bachelor's, master's, JD, or PhD, and 5 points per associate.
Great, thanks. That's it.
Excellent. All right, so now we will move on to the professional practice portion of the application. Professional practice is you working, and you will need 36 points. 1 point equals 1 month. So that would mean that you need to have worked 36 months. And if you're a consultant, you're going to start counting from the month of your first client. Super important, because this is a big mistake people make. If I started my consultancy in May of this year, but I didn't secure my first client until August, I have to start counting from August. I cannot start counting from when I became a consultant, right? You have to actually be consulting in order for us to be able to count it. Now, if you have multiple clients in 1 month, that doesn't change the calculation. So if I had 1 client in August, that's 1 point. If I had 19 clients in August, that's still 1 point, because we're basing it off of the month. We're not basing it off of the number of clients that you had in that month. So some other things to keep in mind is that we need to have seen that you've worked for 36 months out of the last 5 years. And we often on these webinars get people that say something along the lines of, I was in fundraising from 2007 to 2012, and I just came back 6 months ago. Can I get any points for my prior time? Well, that all happened more than 5 years ago, so it's not going to count. We are only going back to that 5-year mark. Now, if you have a blend of time that you've been a consultant, and that you've been directly employed by a nonprofit, that's fine too. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you've only been a consultant for 36 months out of that time. But if you have been a consultant, just be aware you're going to have a client for every month of those 36 months. 50% or more of your duties need to be fundraising related. So if you're a consultant who does PR half the time and fundraising half the time, that's fine. And, we really do need to see that if you're working, not full time, if you're a part-time consultant, that you are doing fundraising 100% of the time. And Paul, can you talk for a second about how that works? So, because we know consultants don't always work a straight 40-hour week.
Yeah, so generally speaking, we understand that consultants aren't necessarily working those 40 hours a week. So you do earn 1 point per month that you work with a client, regardless of how many hours or days you spent during that particular month working with the client. So in that respect, it's a little bit easier to earn a point for a consultant, keeping in mind, though, that if you don't work with a client during that month, just because you're employed as a consultant, you don't get a point. You have to actually be working with a client in order to earn a point for that month. And you cannot earn more than you cannot earn more than 1 point per month, even if you're working with multiple clients during that month.
Excellent, thank you, Paul. If you have a pro bono client, that's totally fine. Those will count, and I'm going to show you something in the next slide that will make that a little easier to understand. But you must have a contract in place. So you can't say, oh, I'm doing consultancy work for my daughter's school and it was a handshake and that's, our agreement. We have to see, or we have to know that there is a contract in place for that pro bono work to count. Now, if you look at your screen here, you're going to see a screenshot of what it looks like inside the application for the professional practice section. You'll see here where that arrow just came up, your role, that's a drop down, and one of the options that you can select is consultant. So obviously if you're a consultant, that's the one that you're going to select, right? And then you're going to put that start date, right, that you began working with a client. And then you'll see down here, this is where you're going to start entering in that client list. Super straightforward, client name, the description of what you did, start and end date, and you can tell us right there, check that box, tell us if it's pro bono or not. Easy peasy lemon squeezy, very straightforward. Now, your professional performance, this is the next segment of the application. And this is, again, going back 5 years. And this is essentially the money that you're bringing in, right? You need 55 points, and 1 point equals 25,000 US dollars. And we often have people say, well, why is this only in US dollars? And that's because we're accredited. So we're only allowed to have one currency. We're not allowed to say like, oh, you need this amount in Brazilian real, and you need this amount in Chinese yuan, and you need this amount in Canadian dollars, and this amount in euro, right? We're only allowed to look at this from US dollars, but it's not a big deal if you're outside the US. We have a currency converter inside the application, so it's totally fine. We have plenty and plenty of CFREs from outside the US, so don't worry about that, but that's why it's measured in that. And just a few little hints here. If you are counting events, you're going to report the gross. If it's a planned gift, right? If, let's say, Dwayne the Rock Johnson calls you up and says, oh, I'm going to leave your client $5 million in my will, that's great. But you need to have that money either be received or it needs to be an irrevocable pledge, right? You can't just say, oh, someone called me and told me they're going to do this. It's got to be formalized. And secured grants will also count. Now, inside the application, this is what this looks like here. So you see the funds raised down at the bottom. There's a field where you're going to put in the name of the organization, the fiscal year start, the funds that you raised. And then there are several fundraising types, and you'll pick the one from that box on the left, and you'll use the little toggle triangles and move it over to the chosen. And then you would just save and add another. So that's how you're going to add in the funds that you've raised. So you can earn points as well through management and communications projects. So a client may not always be calling upon you for fundraising, right? They might say, we need you to overhaul our weekly e-newsletter. And you can earn points for that as well. We award 5 points per project like that. And it has to have a start and an end date. So if you go in, let's say last month, November, you went in, you started working with a client on their e-newsletter, you finished the project in December, so it's got a start date in November, an end date in December, that's a project. But if someone is hiring you and every week you put together their e-newsletter, that's not a project, right? Because it doesn't necessarily have a start and an end date. That's just a task. So we have a number of examples on our website if you want to take a look at them. And they are actually ones, we've scrubbed the identifying information, but ones that people have submitted to us and that we have accepted. So I've got a couple application tips here for you. The professional practice client list should match the professional performance client list. So what I mean by that is, you're telling us the clients you had to show the number of months you've been working, but then you show us the list of clients you raised money for, and you have a different set of clients, or not all the clients are exactly the same, we're going to send your application back to you, because the client list needs to match in both of these areas, which sounds very straightforward, but for some reason it kind of trips people up. So just make sure that all of that is in fact going to match. Another error people commonly make is listing themselves as a nonprofit staff member. So make sure that you're always selecting consultant from that dropdown. And again, just make sure your time with clients is at least 36 months. Another thing that for some reason can really trip people up. We highly recommend that you store all of your documentation in your personal email. And if you're a self-employed consultant, this is probably not nearly as big a deal. But if you work for a big consultancy, or let's say part of your time that you're using to count towards your CFRE was when you worked for Girl Scouts 2 years ago, whatever, just make sure that you save all of that proof somewhere you can access it, because it's super common that people start saving all of their event agendas, their registration confirmation emails in a work email, and then suddenly, unexpectedly, they're not at their job anymore and they have none of that proof. They can lose 4 or 5 years of proof just like that, and we don't want that to happen to you. So just make sure you keep everything in an email that you will always be able to access. We talked about this in the FAQs, but it's $700 US for members of participating organizations and $875 is the regular rate. Those have not increased for a number of years. They are not going to increase next year. So for your planning, that's what you can go with. And as I said before, you're only going to pay at the point in time that you're ready to submit your application. So if you're just exploring this, you want to get your application going, have a look around inside, that's totally fine. It's not going to cost you anything. All right, and now I'm going to move over to Amie Bossi, who is a CFRE Ambassador and a consultant who is based in St. Louis. And Amie is going to talk to us a little bit about her becoming a CFRE as a consultant for a few slides. So thank you, Amie, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I knew I wanted to become a CFRE early in my career, and actually I didn't even know I wanted to become a development person. I didn't know what it was and didn't know it was a job I could actually have. But once I started doing it, my boss at the time was like, "You're good at it. You should be our development director." And I did some research, found out I enjoyed it, and looked into learning more about it, joined my local AFP chapter, became a fellow, and going to some of those classes, learned that the next logical step could be to become a CFRE, that it would bring legitimacy to my career. Most of the folks on my board saw me as really a young person in the field, and I wanted them to respect me and respect my opinion, and I thought earning my CFRE would do that. It really supports the field that I've dedicated my life to. We mentioned the importance of ethics, and this shows that I'm committed to that sense of ethics and that I uphold all of the things that are true and aligned with being ethical in the field. And it really demonstrates my knowledge and expertise to clients and potential clients. It shows that I'm connected to a community of practice, and it showcases me as an expert in the field. It helps me to stand out. I'll never forget at one job when I was actually in the field as a development officer, saying to a board member, "Oh, I'm about to earn my CFRE," and he said, "Well, what is that?" And I explained what it was, and he just automatically said, I felt his respect at a higher level for me, and I can tell that in my firm, which is Gladiator Consulting, that I'm the only one with a CFRE, and I'm automatically added to every proposal that we do that has anything to do with fundraising and development because I have those letters behind my name. And it just makes people feel more at ease knowing that I have that expertise. Next slide. So some of the benefits of earning my CFRE, that shows my ability to set and achieve goals. It sounds silly, but it took a lot of work to, say I'm going to get my CFRE and then to achieve it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. It demonstrates my commitment to the field. There's a lot of folks that say, I want to be in fundraising, and then they just or be a consultant even, and hang a shingle out on their door and then expect to do the work and do it well. And that's not always the case. But having earned my CFRE, I've proven, and I continue to prove every 3 years, that I'm dedicated and continue knowledge and have all of that practice, and am dedicated to continuing to do that. It also ensures my ongoing education to ethics and continued learning. I cannot stress ethics enough. I've had, I know 2 people, not at organizations I've been part of, but that have behaved unethically, and it is not good. And you do not want your organization to be the one that has to fire or be under the radar for having had someone stealing money. You don't want that. And I certainly don't want to do that. And I want it fixed. It doesn't just affect that person, it affects our entire sector. So don't do that. Don't be that person. Adhere. And having those letters behind my name, CFRE, really shows that I'm committed to ethics in the practice. And then it marks me as an expert in the field and makes me stand out among other consultants. I hope that at the top of the pile, when people are reviewing proposals, that Amie Bossi CFRE really stands out. And then I know that it does because clients have told me as well. Next slide. So how do you get started? Go right now, even if you're not going to do it until a year, 2 years, start your profile today, and then track everything in an email that you're never going to get rid of. It is so hard to go back and find the things that you're looking for, that conferences you've attended years ago. Start now and then continue, even if you don't plan on turning in and paying for it until a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. Start now. And then find a mentor, some other person in the community that can be your support system. When I studied for my test, I didn't have a study team, but I'm learning and hearing from other folks that have, that was the one thing that really set them apart and really helped push them and help them to succeed. Read all of the suggested ancillary reading materials. I didn't really read that many, and I was really uneasy going into the test about the areas that I was not really strong in, like planned giving. So I should have done more reading in that regard to make me feel more comfortable. And then take the CFRE review course if it's offered in your area. Now that things are virtual, you could probably access one more easily. I took the one that was offered through my local AFP chapter, and then forgot about taking the test, got busy with work, decided to take it within a window that was the last window for the year, and took out my book to study a week before the test. And quickly realized, oh gosh, I need to buckle down. Canceled a bunch of things, really put my nose to the grindstone, studied really hard, reread the whole book. Was so nervous when I went to take the test, that. I left my keys in the car running during the whole 2.5 hours that it took me to take the test. But I passed, and I've recertified once. And right now I'm kind of getting on myself for not keeping my profile as updated as I want to. I'm like every week, every 2 weeks, keep your profile updated so you don't have to go in at the end of every year and update it. But learn from my mistakes. Start early, study often, and keep track of everything. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Amie. I appreciate it. And I'm going to just keep my camera off here for some bandwidth here. So are there any questions, Paul, that have come in?
Yeah, we've got some great questions coming in. So I'll just get right into it. One person is asking, over the last 5 years, I've had almost exclusively worked in grants. Is it okay for all of my performance points to come from grants and no other categories?
Yeah, that's totally fine. They can all be from one category. Especially a lot of people get very specialized the further along in their careers they are, and that's fine. You don't necessarily have to have like X amount of points from events and X amount of points from, you know, something else. That's totally fine.
Great. Next question, if our practice performance in the last 5 years includes time as staff, can we note both our consulting and staff service in the application?
Yeah, Paul, how do you like to see that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely list them as two separate unique entries because there are two categories. One category for nonprofit staff members. When you're selecting your role, let's say you just indicate your time that you were in that as a non-staff member, and then as a second entry, you would a completely new entry, it would be your consultant entry, indicating your time as a consultant, including a client list. So absolutely include all of your employment history that's been fundraising related, whether it's been as a staff member at a nonprofit or as a consultant, all of that is eligible. And this application is not specific to consultants, and there's not a specific application to nonprofit staff members. Everyone fills out the same application, so list all of your experiences there. Next question, when managing a team and responsible for the full team's performance, do I count the team's performance as part of my professional performance?
Yes, you would. Fundraising is a team sport.
Yeah, exactly. We always say that fundraising is a team sport. So really any funds that were raised as a result of your supervision or management, or as a result of your involvement in the cultivation, solicitation, or strategy for the gift can be counted. All team members are eligible to report those same funds. However, if you have a responsibility for one area of a larger effort, then only count those funds. Even if a volunteer made the ask, you can still claim those funds as well. So we're pretty flexible in that respect. And I have one more question. Do you need to have professional performance items for every client listed in professional practice?
Yes, ideally. Is that right, Paul?
So, well, we certainly need to see any client you list under practice, any client you list under performance does need to be included as part of your practice client list. But no, you don't need to list performance for every client. So if you fulfill the performance requirement simply through one solitary client, you raised $2 million for a particular client, US dollars, you can just list that client under performance and you would have met the requirement.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying that.
Sure.
All right. So I'll keep going here. We about 20 minutes left. So the CFRE exam is the next thing we're going to talk about. We offer it during 4 test windows a year, and you can see these on your screen. So it's not offered 365 days a year. There are application deadlines for each testing window. And what that means is, let's say you want to sit for the exam on January 17th. You need to get your application in advance of that. And honestly, if you're going to sit for it on January 17th, don't submit it on January 15th, because we have to have time to review it and get the testing information. We send you an email with how to arrange your exam. So don't cut it really close. But if you want to sit for the exam in the first test window of 2021, you will need to have your application into us by January 15th. Now, you're going to select the test window in the application. And so choose wisely, because there is a $35 fee to change windows. sometimes people think like, oh, I haven't studied enough, I just want to push it back. And we really don't want people to push this back indefinitely. So there's a $35 US fee for that. But if you have a complication due to COVID, there's no fee. And then once your application is approved, you have 1 year to sit for the exam. But just keep in mind these test windows. So if you submit your application and it gets approved on April 1, looking here at the testing dates, we don't offer the test on April 1. So the last day you could actually take it would be March 15th of the following year. A lot of people say, geez, I don't know how long to study. Well, the exam measures knowledge at the 5-year practice level. So if you have 5 years or more of fundraising experience, plan to study at least 40 hours. And if you have fewer than 5 years, then you're going to need to study at least 80 hours. We can't tell you exactly what you need to study in the sense that everybody is different, right? So I'll talk a little bit in the coming slides about how you'll determine what to study. But we also realize, people want to do this as economically as possible. So a lot of people will rent, borrow, buy, or listen to the different preparation materials to save money. And I'll talk about that in a second too. So the exam covers 6 knowledge domains that you see on your screen here. Securing the gift and relationship building together make up 49% of the exam. So you will absolutely want to dedicate your study time in those areas. But overall, anything that you don't feel comfortable that you can answer an exam question on is where you're going to want to focus your study. This is a copy of part of the test content outline. So the test content outline, you can only see domain 1 here, but it's 6 domains, like I said. And this gets into the nitty-gritty of what each of those domains covers. I will send you a link to this in the follow-up email. It's also on our website. Print this out, highlight everything that you don't think you could answer an exam question on. Then you're going to pop over to our website that has the resource reading list. It has 14 books. We do not expect you to read 14 books. You're only going to read the ones that line up to the knowledge domains where you need to strengthen your knowledge. So the resource reading list on every single book, it will tell you exactly which knowledge domains it covers so that you can make sure that you're reading the books that will actually help you with the knowledge you need to acquire. Now, most people read 1 to 3 books, and a lot of times people can get these books from libraries. If someone recently became a CFRE, they might be willing to lend you their materials. Some people ask their employer to buy these items, and then they say, when I'm done reading it, the team can have access to it, so it's available to everyone. And if you do decide to do a study group, you may want to divide and conquer the purchasing with the other people in that study group. If you look at your screen now, this is a screenshot of the Achieving Excellence in Fundraising book. This is a super popular book. It is a comprehensive book that many people use to prepare for the exam. A number of people tell us it's the only book they used. So if you're looking for a single source text, this might be one for you. And if you look here, the audiobook is free with an Audible account trial on Amazon. If you don't have an Audible account already, check. This special is run all the time on the Amazon US, Amazon Canada, and the Amazon UK websites. So if you want to save money and you're open to preparing via an audiobook, this can be a great way to get that information for free. We also have other free resources on our website, like the test content outline. We have a study plan template PDF that will help you make a week-by-week plan of what you will study. We also have tip sheets on study groups. We have an online community called CFRE Central where people often post like, hey, I'm looking for a study buddy. And now that everything's virtual, you might be in Ottawa, but you might find someone in Miami that wants to be your study buddy. Well, that's perfect. Just hop on Zoom and you can work it out between the two of you. We have a candidate handbook on our website as well. That's the full A to Z of anything and everything you could ever want to know about taking the exam. We also have a glossary, which is super important. Absolutely, absolutely read this glossary because it is the language of the exam. You don't have to memorize the definitions, but it has the common words, right? So when we say donor, what do we mean? When we say stewardship, what do we mean? So that you don't get any kind of confusion about how any terminology on the exam is used. And then we also have a link to our CFRE exam recorded webinar on our YouTube channel. We also have a study guide that came out earlier this year. You don't have to use this by any means to prepare. I only recommend it if you find it difficult to structure your study time. You will still need a book to read to actually get the meat and potatoes, right, of what you need to know for the exam. But this will help you if you struggle to make a study plan. It also has sample questions on it. But if you get your application in by midnight of December 15th, so 12 days from now, we're actually going to send you the hard copy of this free once your application is approved. So if that's attractive to you, you want to save $50 US, there's no shipping fee or anything, we'll mail it to your primary postal address. So if your application gets approved or gets sent in by midnight, December 15th, you will receive your complimentary copy of the study guide that will be mailed this month. There are other resources on our website. We have a practice exam. It's a subscription-based model. It has a bank of 100 questions. You can see the fees here for that. Again, 100% do not have to use this if you don't want to. It's just there in case you need to take the edge off your test anxiety. What is the CFRE exam like? People always feel very nervous about it. It's global, so it's the same no matter if you sit for it in Vancouver or you sit for it in Manchester. It's computer-based, and there are no tax or country-specific questions. It's 200 multiple choice questions, and there are 4 options per question, and you will be asked to select the best answer. So more than one answer may look correct, but we're looking for the best answer. We're looking for the best practice. The exam, you will have 4 hours to take it. You heard Amie say she did it in 2.5. That's very common. We have a lot of people, I mean, the vast majority of people do not take 4 hours. That time is there if you need it. And every question on it ties back to something in the test content outline. So you're not going to be getting stuff out of left field that you didn't know that you needed to study for. You can move backwards and forwards in the exam. So that means that if you finish it early, you can go back and check your work if you want. The score range is 200 to 800, and 500 is a passing score. Unfortunately, Paul and I are not psychometricians, so if you need more information on how this is scored, we do have this information on our website, so you'll have a better idea. But it's a hard 500. So if you get 499, you have not passed. You must get 500 and above. The pass rate is 80%. Typically, it changes window to window, but that's very much in line with professional certifications. It's not full of trick questions. It's nothing like that. We're not trying to trap you. We now have 2 options for how you sit for the exam. We work with a company called Pearson VUE, and they have a product called OnView. So if you want to sit for the exam at home or from your office, you can absolutely do that now. That it will be available starting in the next test window. Or if you prefer to go in person to a Pearson VUE test center, that's fine. You can go to this URL here, pearsonvue.com/CFRE, type in your postal or zip code, and it will populate what you see here for your area. So this is for Silicon Valley, and you can see that it's showing me on a map where my test locations are, and then on the left side, there's the list of addresses. So super easy. You can have a look there to find out where your nearest test center is. Once you finish your exam, you will immediately see your score, and you will not see what questions you got right or wrong. Once somebody told me, I'm not going to study for the exam, I'm going to just take it. And then when I see what I got wrong, I will then just study for that. Well, that's not going to work because you will not know what you got right or wrong. And that is to protect question leaking. So we take the security of this exam very, very seriously. Once you finish, you will get a confirmation email from us within 1 business day. And at that point, you can add CFRE to your business cards, your LinkedIn profile, your email signature. We do mail certificates monthly. So if you pass, on December 4th, you're not going to find the certificate in your mailbox December 8th. We do them all in batches once a month right now. And then within a week, you're going to get your digital badge, which looks like this. And I did take this screenshot off an actual person's LinkedIn, but I took off their identifying info. If you're a consultant, this is super, super valuable because this is a credible way that you can announce this to your network that you are now a CFRE. And I just want you to look down at the bottom here. This person got 147 likes and 32 comments. People love these. So when you become a CFRE, share this badge on LinkedIn. All your potential clients, your network, everyone is going to see it that you're connected to. We also have the Find a CFRE tool. So if somebody's like, oh, is Ashley really a CFRE? That, people like to verify things. They can jump to our website, search for your name here, and it's going to show that you're a CFRE. So also super helpful if you're a consultant. If you don't pass the exam, you do need to wait 30 days to retake it. And there's a $375 US retake fee. People say, yeah, that's really expensive. I don't want to pay that. Well, we don't want you to pay it either. We want you to pass the first time, right? We believe that there should be more CFREs in this sector. So that $375 is really a deterrent. If you study very well the first time, you will not need to worry about this. Amie also mentioned that she had just recertified once. And the way that we work is you recertify every 3 years. That is the value of the CFRE, right? If you earn a certification in 1999 and now it's 2020, how valid is that certification, right? How much has changed in the time in between? But when you're recertifying as a CFRE, that's showing everyone your knowledge is current. It's an online application and the fee is $510 US or $408 US for participating organization members. There's no exam. So once you pass that exam for the initial certification, you will never have to sit for it again. Recertification, you can see the point values here, 45 points for continuing education. So that's about 15 a year, very manageable. 30 points in professional practice. So if you are unemployed or you have several months where you don't have a client, we completely understand. So we do have that allotment. You don't have to work every single month out of that 3-year recertification cycle. And you will need your 40 points in professional performance. So you need to show that you have continued raising funds. All right, and so I know we're just about at time here. Paul, any other questions that have come in?
Actually, I think you answered all of the questions I had marked just in the past couple of minutes. I'll re-ask them just in case. We had several people ask, how do I find a CFRE review course?
Oh, sure. So if you go to the My Education Finder on our website, you will be able to do a search for online or in person. Obviously, I don't think there's many in person right now, but that's a great way to get started looking.
And I would also add, occasionally we'll post study groups on the study aid section of our website as well. So check there, be sure to check there as well. And finally, does the unlimited practice exam receive a grade after each time you take it?
Yes, so you will see exactly what you got wrong and what you got right. So people love it for that when they start studying, because then that way they'll know precisely their areas of weakness so that they don't waste time studying things that they actually know. And then they can just be a lot more focused and wise with their study time.
Great, that's all I have.
All right, well, thank you so much, everyone. The recording will be headed your way within the next 24 hours. We appreciate your time. Look forward to reviewing your application and have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.